Get away from that thing, Mia! It's filthy! Mrs. Langley's voice sliced through the alleyway like broken glass, but the little girl didn't even flinch. 7-year-old Mia Harper knelt in the rain, cradling the trembling body of a soaked puppy no bigger than a football. He was wrapped in a torn sweater, eyes barely open, ribs poking through damp fur. He hadn't made a sound, but his tiny body shivered so violently it was like he was trying to disappear into her arms. "I'm not leaving him," Mia shouted, back, tears mixing with the cold drizzle that streaked her face. "He's hurt. He's alone." The woman huffed from the sidewalk, arms folded, umbrella tilting with impatience. "That's not your problem. You don't even know where it's been. Let the shelter handle it." But her voice cracked just slightly. She was scared too, of disease, of fleas, of everything people had been trained to fear when it came to street animals. Mia didn't move. The puppy's eyes fluttered closed, and that was enough. She wrapped him in her coat and ran, past the neighbors' parked cars, through puddles that splashed up her legs, all the way down the street toward the edge of the woods where the town ended and the forgotten trees began. Her legs burned, her heart raced, but she didn't stop until the angry voices were distant echoes and the storm hid her in its mist. She finally paused beneath a sagging pine tree, sinking to her knees in the mud. The puppy didn't stir. His breathing was shallow now, barely. There, panic clawed at her throat. "Don't you dare," she whispered. "Don't you dare leave me." That's when she heard it, the faintest rustle behind her. Mia turned, heart pounding, expecting maybe a raccoon or some stray animal, but it wasn't one. It was 5. 5 dogs, big ones, silent, not barking, not growling, just watching from between the trees. Their fur was wild and matted, their bodies lean, built for survival. One looked like a mastiff, another a shepherd with torn ears, and at the center stood a scarred husky with pale, intelligent eyes that locked onto her like he knew her name. Mia froze. Her fingers tightened around the puppy's body. The husky stepped forward. He didn't lunge or bare teeth. He simply approached, slow and deliberate, and sniffed the air around her. Then, with an odd gentleness, he nuzzled the side of the coat she had wrapped around the puppy and let out a low, mournful whine. Mia's fear wavered. "He's dying," she said softly, not expecting an answer. But something in the husky's gaze flickered. Recognition, maybe, or sorrow. He turned to the others and let out a sharp yip. One by one, the pack moved forward, forming a loose half-circle around her like sentinels. And that's when she noticed something strange. Each of them bore scars, not the kind from dog fights or wild living. These were deliberate, patterns, burns, small metal tags embedded just beneath the skin on their necks. Some rusted, some new. These dogs hadn't escaped a shelter. They had escaped something far worse. Mia looked down at the puppy again. His breathing hitched, then steadied, just slightly. The warmth of her coat and the shelter of the pine canopy helped, but it wasn't enough. She didn't know what to do. Then the husky walked past her, nudging her gently with his muzzle. He started walking. The rest followed. And Mia, torn between the warnings of grown-ups and the quiet certainty building in her chest, stood up and followed too. She didn't know where they were going. She only knew that the storm above was getting worse and that something about this felt less like danger and more like destiny. By the time they reached the edge of a clearing, dusk had started to fall. The trees parted around a half-buried structure made of corrugated metal and rotting boards, an old shed, forgotten by time. The husky pushed open the door with his paw, revealing a makeshift den inside. Blankets, bowls, even torn pages from an old vet manual. Someone had cared here, once. The pack gathered around her as Mia stepped inside and laid the puppy down on the softest patch of cloth she could find. Then, in an act that would stay with her forever, the mastiff curled up around the puppy's left side. The shepherd took his right. One by one, the others formed a living wall of warmth and breath around the tiny body, until he was cocooned in fur and the last of his shivers faded. Mia sat down too, her back against the shed's creaking wall, rain tapping gently on the roof above. She didn't know why they had trusted her. She didn't know why she trusted them, but somehow in that moment, it didn't matter. They had all found something that night, something worth protecting. Mia didn't sleep that night. Not really. She sat curled up in the corner of the shed with her knees drawn to her chest, eyes flickering between the puppy resting in the center and the pack that guarded him like silent guardians. The husky had settled closest, never blinking, his breath calm and even, like a soldier on watch. Thunder still growled faintly in the distance, but the worst of the storm had passed. What remained was a hush that felt too sacred to break. By dawn, a pale slice of light peeked through the cracks in the shed walls, and for the first time, the puppy stirred without trembling. His little body twitched as he took a deeper breath, and one paw curled inwards, like he was reaching for something in a dream. Mia's heart lifted. He was still here, but just as she smiled, a distant sound made every head snap toward the tree line. Tires on gravel. Not fast, but steady, crunching closer. Mia rose quickly, peeking through the slats of the shed. At first, all she saw was the overgrown road that led out of the woods, until a black SUV came into view. Not a police car, not a park ranger. It had no markings, no sirens. And it was moving slowly, like whoever was inside knew exactly where they were going. The dogs were already moving, quiet, but alert. The mastiff growled low. The shepherd's ears flattened. Only the husky stayed still, eyes locked on the vehicle, his body tense like a coiled spring. Mia's breath caught. She stepped back and whispered, "What is it?" The husky finally looked at her, and in his eyes was something she didn't expect: fear. The SUV stopped 100 feet away. Two men stepped out, both dressed in black jackets and heavy boots. One carried a tablet, the other a long pole with a loop on the end. Not for pets, for capture. Mia's stomach turned. She backed away and crouched beside the puppy, who whimpered softly. The dogs moved around her in an instant, forming a loose wall between her and the shed's entrance. But even they looked unsure, like the memories of past pain still hung heavy in their muscles. Then she heard one of the men speak, his voice flat and cold. "Tracker says they're all here. Heat signatures match." The other replied, "Bag them fast. 1 dart each. Don't let the big one charge." Mia's eyes went wide. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. These weren't animal control officers. They were something else, and they weren't here to help. The first man pointed toward the shed. "Kid, too. Witnesses make it messy." Mia gasped. She didn't think. She grabbed the puppy, wrapped him in her jacket again, and looked to the husky. "Please," she whispered. "Help me." The husky didn't hesitate. He let out a sharp bark that sent the other dogs into motion. The mastiff and the shepherd charged first, not toward the men, but toward the trees, creating a distraction. Their growls echoed like thunder through the woods. One man raised his dart gun, but by the time he aimed, the husky was already leading Mia through a gap in the shed wall she hadn't even noticed before. They ran. Branches tore at her arms. Thorns bit her legs. She clutched the puppy tight against her chest as the world blurred past in streaks of green and brown. Behind them, the shouts grew louder, but they didn't slow. The husky darted through the underbrush with uncanny precision, guiding her around fallen logs and hidden dips like he knew every inch of this forest. They didn't stop until they reached a stream, a wide, fast-moving cut of water that rushed over jagged stones. The husky leapt it with ease. Mia hesitated only a moment before following, her legs burning as she splashed across, nearly slipping, on the slick rocks. When she made it to the other side, she collapsed onto the bank, gasping for breath. The husky nudged her with his snout, urging her onward, but before they moved again, she turned to look back, and there, through the trees, she saw something she'd never forget. The other dogs, all of them, fighting not to kill, but to protect. The shepherd darted in and out like a shadow, drawing one man away. The mastiff stood between the SUV and the forest, holding the line with a terrifying stillness. But it was the fourth dog, the one Mia had barely noticed until now, a limping greyhound with a scar across his eye, who surprised her most. He stepped out onto the trail, planted himself in front of the man with the dart gun, and barked once, sharp and defiant. Then the forest exploded with noise. Birds took flight, branches cracked, and the men, they backed off, retreating, confused, maybe even afraid. The dogs didn't chase. They didn't need to. Their message had been sent. Mia turned, back and followed the husky deeper into the woods. Hours passed, maybe more. Time blurred. When they finally reached a clearing at the edge of town, the husky stopped and looked up at her. Beyond the trees was safety, streetlights, homes, people. But when she turned to thank him, the husky was already walking away. She didn't call after him. She didn't need to. He had done what he came to do. Mia stepped out of the woods, clutching the puppy close, and walked toward the first porch light she could find. Someone would help now. Someone had to. And maybe one day, she'd tell them the truth. About the dogs, about what they protected, and about the girl who followed them into the woods and found something she never knew she was missing. Mia thought. She understood bravery until that moment in the barn when the world held its breath. The puppy in her arms, the scarred husky standing beside her, and the echo of the gunshot still ringing in her ears. Those seconds felt like they stretched across lifetimes. Her heart was beating so loud she couldn't hear anything else. Not even the wind whispering through the cracks in the old wood. But when the quiet returned and the shouting stopped, she knew something had changed. The intruders were gone, for now, driven off by a pack that wasn't supposed to be smart or loyal or organized. And yet they had moved like a unit, fast, silent, purposeful. The husky, whom Mia had started to call Ash in her mind, didn't sit down or rest. His body was still tense, tail rigid, eyes locked on the forest beyond the broken fence. The others returned one by one, the shepherd limping slightly, the mastiff's jowls speckled with dirt and leaves, and the wiry greyhound sniffing the air, constantly circling back to check on them. They regrouped around the barn, forming a protective ring. Mia realized then this wasn't over. She held the puppy tighter, his body warmer now, his breath stronger. But the look on Ash's face told her this place wasn't safe anymore. The men would return, and this time they wouldn't just bring darts. They would bring cages, or worse. Mia stood, her knees aching, and whispered, "Where do we go now?" Ash turned, padded forward, and glanced back once, as if answering her question. With a command, "Follow," they moved at dusk, quiet through the woods, keeping off the trails, ducking under branches and weaving through thick undergrowth. Mia didn't ask where they were going, because some part of her trusted Ash more than anyone she had ever met. He seemed to know every path, every sound. The way he paused when owls hooted, or adjusted course to avoid broken glass or old barbed wire. It felt like he'd been running these woods for years. It's a hideout. She laid the puppy down carefully, using her jacket as bedding. His tiny tongue peeked out as he slept, tail twitching as if dreaming. Mia watched him, brushing his head gently, her thoughts spinning. How had it come to this? A trip to the park, a found puppy, and now she was hiding underground with a pack of street-smart dogs who had risked their lives for her. The sound of footsteps jolted her upright, but it wasn't from outside. It came from behind. Another tunnel entrance, one Mia hadn't noticed, opened near the hillside's far end. For a moment, fear surged, but then a figure emerged, hunched and cautious, holding a flashlight low to the ground. It was an old man. His beard was tangled, his coat patched with more memories than fabric. When he saw the dogs, he froze, hand on his belt as if expecting a fight. But then Ash barked once, not a warning, but a signal. The old man blinked, then chuckled softly. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, kneeling. "You brought her here?" Mia stepped forward, shielding the puppy. "Who are you?" "Name's Elijah," he said, setting the flashlight down gently. "I used to look after these dogs, before they were thrown out, before the program shut down." "What program?" Elijah exhaled, rubbing his eyes. "A training project. High level. Secret. These dogs weren't just rescue animals. They were part of something bigger. War dogs. Scout trackers. Intelligence testers. But someone cut funding. Decided they weren't worth the cost. So they were released. Dumped." Mia's mouth went dry. "But they still work together. They protect. They remember," Elijah said, voice thick. More than anyone thought possible. She looked at Ash, who now sat between her and Elijah like a quiet sentinel. "What were those men doing back there?" she asked. "Trying to take them. Again. The project failed publicly, but not everyone let it go. Some folks think these dogs are still useful for experiments, for surveillance. They were trying to recover the entire pack, including that puppy." Mia shook her head. "He's just a baby, maybe. Or maybe they bred something into him, something they weren't supposed to." Silence settled again, the kind that comes before hard decisions. "I can't leave him," Mia said. Elijah nodded. "Slowly. I didn't think you would." The night dragged on. At some point, the dogs curled around the edges of the tunnel, forming a warm living blanket. Mia lay beside the puppy, staring at the dim ceiling, sleep tugging at her eyelids. But even as she drifted off, her last thought was clear. She was going to fight for them, all of them, whatever it took. The air in the tunnel had grown heavier, dense with the weight of truths Mia wasn't sure she was ready for. She sat on the cold stone floor, her knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on the sleeping puppy whose small body rose and fell with shallow, rhythmic breaths. Around her, the dogs rested like sentries, each one positioned with quiet purpose, always facing outward, as though waiting for the next threat to appear. And somewhere just beyond the reach of the dying flashlight, Ash remained half standing, ears tilted toward the darkness, nose twitching every few seconds. He hadn't let his guard down for a moment. Elijah crouched nearby, scribbling notes into an old, cracked leather journal. Every few pages he would pause, glance at Mia, and then back at the page. She wasn't sure if he was recording the moment or trying to make sense of it. Perhaps both. "How did you find them?" Mia finally asked, her voice low but firm. "Why, are they listening to you?" Elijah sighed, closing the book and setting it gently on his knee. "I didn't find them. They found me, years ago. I was part of the project. Not a scientist, not really. More of a trainer. They assigned me to early behavioral development, helping the dogs bond, trust, follow commands. But what they didn't expect was how much they'd feel. Feel? Yes. Empathy, loyalty, loss. They were engineered for intelligence. But what grew in them was something else. Something we couldn't measure." Mia's eyes flicked to Ash, who had now walked quietly to the puppy's side, resting his nose gently on the pup's paw, as if drawing comfort from it. Why didn't anyone stop them from being dumped? Because no one wanted to admit the mistake. Too much money had been spent. Too many headlines had already praised the project. When it started to unravel, when the dogs refused to obey certain kinds of orders, they called it a flaw. But it wasn't a flaw. It was a conscience. Elijah's. Words hit Mia harder than she expected. She looked again at Ash, the dog who had protected her again and again, who had led the others, who had never left the puppy's side. He didn't have to do any of it. He chose to. Suddenly the quiet snapped. A sharp, echoing bark from the shepherd jolted them all upright. Ash was on his feet in an instant, his muscles coiled, eyes burning toward the back of the tunnel. The others rose around him, forming a tight arc near Mia and the puppy. Elijah stood slowly, flashlight trembling in his hand. "It's them," he whispered. "They found us." Before Mia could ask how, a voice rang out from the far end of the tunnel, cold, authoritative. "We know you're in there. Send the girl out." "And the dogs." Mia's heart thudded in her chest. She held the puppy tightly and shook her head, even though no one had spoken to her directly. Elijah moved between her and the tunnel entrance, his voice calm but firm. "You can't take them. They're not yours anymore. You're interfering with a federal operation," the voice warned. "You have 10 seconds, Ash growled, low and steady. It was a sound that didn't just warn, it promised something worse. The other dogs followed, their collective growl turning into a chilling, unified hum of resistance. Mia could feel it, in her bones. Then, something strange happened. From behind her, deeper into the tunnel, another bark echoed, then another, and another, until it became clear that this tunnel didn't just hide one pack. It connected to others. From the darkness emerged more dogs, half a dozen at first, then dozens more. Some were scruffy, some scarred, some limping, but all had the same fire in their eyes. They moved with purpose, forming walls of fur and muscle around Mia, Elijah, and the puppy. The enemy had brought darts. These dogs brought unity. A crack of a boot echoed from the tunnel mouth, followed by the sound of retreating steps. The man on the other end knew he was outnumbered, not in weapons, perhaps, but in heart. Silence returned, broken only by the rhythmic panting of the dogs. Mia exhaled slowly, realizing she hadn't taken a full breath in over a minute. Elijah nodded, his face a mix of relief and something deeper, pride. Ash walked forward, stopped beside Mia, and gently nudged her hand with his snout. "You saved him," she whispered, stroking his head. "All of you did." "No," Elijah said, kneeling beside her. "You did. You reminded them what they were. You gave them a reason to fight." Mia looked around at the sea of eyes watching her, trusting her. That night, under the blanket of stars that stretched above the tunnel, Mia made a silent vow. She wouldn't let them be forgotten again. She would find a way to protect them, to speak for them, to tell the world that loyalty doesn't expire and love can never be engineered or erased. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she wouldn't face it alone. Not with Ash by her side, not with a family built in the shadows, but stronger than anything the light could destroy. The morning sky bled with the colors of a reluctant dawn, deep purples fading to bruised orange, light stretching across the hills like a slow apology. Mia stood barefoot at the mouth of the tunnel, holding the puppy in her arms as dew clung to the grass around her feet. Behind her, the forest pack rested in the clearing, no longer tense but not at peace either. Elijah stood nearby, his face drawn but calm, a hand resting on Ash's shoulder. The German shepherd leaned into him like an old friend, worn by duty. They had made it through the night. The government men had retreated, not because they gave up, but because they were overwhelmed by something they hadn't accounted for. Unity, loyalty, love. But Mia knew that wasn't the end. They couldn't just walk back to town and pretend none of it happened. There would be questions, cameras, headlines. But more than that, there would be danger. Some of those dogs had escaped from something dark, and the men behind it would come back to claim them, twist the story, or erase it altogether. "I have to do something," Mia whispered. Elijah didn't speak right away. He watched the way. Ash circled the resting dogs, gently checking the wounded, licking the ears of the youngest, lying briefly beside the oldest. "You already have," he said finally. "You made them visible again, but it's not enough," she replied. "Eyes sharp now. We need to show everyone what they are, what they've done, before someone else tells a lie." Elijah studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Then we tell the truth." And that's exactly what they did. It started with one post online, an old photo of Ash from the project archives, the caption written in Mia's voice. "They called him disposable, but last night he saved my life." Then another photo of the puppy curled in Mia's lap, of Ash guarding the tunnel entrance, of dozens of dogs huddled around a fire lit by Elijah's hands. Within hours, it went viral. Within a day, the news vans arrived. Mia stood in front of them, a girl in torn clothes and muddy boots, but she spoke like someone who had lived lifetimes. She didn't dramatize. She didn't make herself the hero. She told the world about the experiments, about the betrayal, about the courage in those four-legged hearts. And people listened. Veterans who had served with similar dogs reached out. Scientists who had once walked away in silence came forward. Shelter volunteers posted photos of the same breeds, showing kindness, empathy, intelligence. One by one, the story stopped being hers and became everyone's. And the government? They tried to contain it, to deny it. But truth, once seen, can't be unseen. Within weeks, a bill was introduced, the Guardian Act, to protect all service dogs, past and present. It passed with record support. Ash and the pack were relocated, not to a cage, not to a lab, but to a sanctuary funded by public donations. Acres of green hills, shade trees, trails, and ponds. Elijah was named director. Mia visited every weekend, but there was one thing still unfinished: the puppy. Now healthy, full of energy, and just old enough to open his eyes to the world, never strayed from Mia's side. When she laughed, he chased her. When she cried, he nuzzled her. He had never known war or cages, only kindness, and yet he carried the fire of a protector. Just like Ash. On a spring afternoon, under the arching boughs of a cherry blossom tree, Elijah watched Mia place a small collar around the puppy's neck. "What's his name?" he asked softly. Mia smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Valor." Elijah nodded. "Fitting." Ash, now graying slightly at the muzzle, approached and gave the puppy a gentle nudge, as though passing the torch. As the sun dipped low and the day folded into golden silence, Mia sat between the two dogs, her hands resting on their backs, her heart still full of the moment when it all began. The second she reached into the bushes and lifted that trembling, broken puppy in her arms, she thought she was saving him, but in truth, he had saved her too, and maybe, just maybe together, they had saved so much more.